Cayman Islands' #1 choice for online brokerage. OneTradex is licensed to conduct securities investment business by the Cayman Islands Monetary Authority.
Live from Radio Cayman Studio, this is
Money Sense, bringing an informed financial perspective to the Cayman community.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Money Sense. I'm your host, Amy Hubble, along with my co-host, who needs no introduction, Emil Kalinowski.
Thank you, Amy.
Today, we're fortunate to have in studio with us Adam Peckman, the global practice leader in risk consulting at Aon, who will be speaking with us on cyber risk and security. Adam, welcome to Money Sense.
Thank you very much for having me.
We're very excited to be joined by you, but just as a warning, Emil and I are novices at all things cybersecurity, cyber risk technology, so please use very small words and treat us with the kindergarten gloves on, because a lot of that stuff we just do not understand, and I think that's common to our listeners too, is they're not even sure where the risks reside.
Or the definition. What is cyber risk?
Yeah.
Which I'm sure it's not the case with you two, but even having said that, I think what you're tapping into is actually a lot of misconceptions around this topic in terms of it being just a technical topic and not one that, people, financial leaders within business or from a personal standpoint need to be more engaged in. So, a good introduction.
Absolutely. Well, obviously our show deals mainly with financial issues. And so the first thing that even comes to my mind when I'm talking about cybersecurity and financial issues is online banking and the protection of both my password. Is my money safe? Is it safe to transact business via online vehicles? And how do I even know that whoever I'm using through the internet is safe and that it is going to be secure?
And I think, and so, to go back to the question around definition, I think that's an interesting one to first look at in terms of what do we think cyber risk is. And I think depending on where you come from, being a security expert, a insurance expert, somebody from a finance background, cyber can be a little bit of a misnomer as a definition. It's a bit nebulous. It sort of encompasses different things. So depending on who you speak to, it actually takes on a different meaning. I think it almost is better understood as digital risk. What risks do you have from your connectivity, your use of digital technology? Maybe there are issues of privacy, but maybe there are issues of access, of availability. And then I think, thinking about it more like that, you can understand how relevant it is to you as an individual, but as a company.
What do you mean by access and availability? What does that mean?
Yeah, I think, when you think about what cyber risk is, you often think about it as a privacy issue, an availability issue. So I want online banking facilities, and I need them now. I've got a position I want to move because of I want to transact. So I want to get on and I want on my account. I want to be able to make that transaction before the market moves. I can't because of inability to access the application because of some ransomware or thereabouts. So when we think about what cyber risk is, it is a privacy issue, but it's an availability issue, availability of the technology, and also an integrity issue. Do we trust what we're looking at? Is the data correct? Has somebody tampered with it? Is my device operating appropriately? So, it's seen through a couple of different lenses in that way.
Well, it seems like it's very easy to just assume that it is working because you fall into a rut. You're always using your phone or you're always logging in from your computer, and unless something's really catches your eye, you're just going to assume it's working and you'll continue along. Is that the most common sort of mistake? Is it looks reasonably close and so everyone else assumes it is, and then they're caught?
There's a nice parallel between the digital transformation of the companies we work in, irrespective of what vertical that is, from heavy industry right the way through to financial institutions, and actually that automation and connectivity of our lives. And the dependency we have. So when we look at the ransomware events over the last 18 months, that impacted a lot of organizations, cost about $4 billion in additional costs on net income loss to large cap companies. you could also turn around, and when we speak to financial advisors, they report back that about 75% of ultra-high net worth individuals get hit by some type of cyber event on an individual basis. So irrespective of where you sit in that sort of segmentation of large cap right the way through to high net worth, everyone's a target of this, and everyone's exposed because of digital dependency. And we like to think about all the upside that's associated with that. I think it's also useful to think about how you sort of hedge yourself from some of that exposure as well.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, I don't think any of us are going to be willing to give up doing business through our phone or swiping credit cards or chips or anything like that. But certainly the only things that we hear about are the Target breach or even the recent Amazon breach that they have our password, they have our credit card numbers, and then it's just how do you, after that's already happened, besides just going on there, like, go change your password to something just insane that you can never remember, and then you put it on a Post-it note, and that's probably not secure either. But I guess after something like that happens, what's the best thing to do?
So this comes down to a little bit of what I was saying in terms of the misconceptions around the topic. It isn't just a technical topic. When we look from a business standpoint as to many of the causes for cyber risks happening, cyber events happening, it's often human error or insiders with access to systems, and it's much the same on an individual level. It's not necessarily a technical response, but it's actually knowing, what plan would you do in the event of X? Do you know what that plan is? Have you rehearsed that plan? What is your response going to be? And actually, beyond just the sort of technical piece, do you have some sort of capital hedge? Can you in some way protect yourself from the commercial impact of that? So you could be a business and think about insurance or some sort of risk financing mechanism. You can think about it as an individual as well. Now there's a lot of personal lines insurances associated with cyber risk. You hear about the LifeLock and all these other ones, primarily because people think, I'm so digitally dependent. Not just in banking, my home, my car, my ways of connectivity to other people and so forth, my medical devices maybe that I use and other things. Because of that, I think more people say, there's a technical piece and I need to be prepared for that. But also, how do I hedge myself from my own sort of financial impact?
I'd like to ask you about some of those personal digital cyber risk insurance options. But I want to backtrack just a little bit. You were talking a moment ago about ransomware. And this was I think, and you said something happened 18 months ago. So I'd like to ask again for a definition. But if I remember correctly, it seemed like this was the first time, at least for me personally, I don't know about you, Amy, but it seemed like for the first time I felt like this may affect me. Whereas before all those breaches, it seemed impersonal. But this time it seemed I was hearing that computers were being locked down and that you weren't able to access anything on your computer. And you got a message saying, send me Bitcoin to Liechtenstein. Is that ransomware? Is that what I'm thinking of?
And so that was my definition around it. It's not just a privacy issue, it's an availability, it's an access issue. You go to work or you go to your online trading platform and you say, I want to do X, and all of a sudden you're met with a message to say, we now have control of your computer. Or maybe it's just the vendor that you rely upon to provide you that service has misconfigured something and now you don't have. But what's the alternative? We're now so digitally dependent. There isn't necessarily just a manual workaround. In the event of these ransomware, or in the case of some of them, not to get technical, pseudo-ransomware events, they weren't actually holding anyone to ransom. The whole point of it was the business didn't have a manual workaround anymore, because they just assumed we all always have technology available to us. If there's any disruption, we will manage it through communications and connectivity to other suppliers and other alternatives. What happens if all the computers are locked down? How are they going to work through that as an issue? And that's why a lot of people got impacted. And similarly, you think about that from a personal standpoint. What happens if you go to, you're online banking on your phone and you want to change one of your positions of your portfolio, and all of a sudden you don't have access to that online banking. You go to your computer and you realize it's been locked, and somebody's asking you to give them Bitcoin, and you don't have any cryptocurrency. You don't have a wallet. So how do you go about dealing with that for the first time?
Well, you call Amy. She's a Bitcoin exchange.
Yeah, that's not even true. Wouldn't even know how to transact in crypto. Well, that brings me to another situation, even just what Emil said about the word ransomware or dark web or things like that. I think sometimes even I think about the Equifax breach, and after that happened, there were other I don't know if they're members, but things like LifeLock and things like that are then coming along and then trying to scare people of all of your information is on the dark web, whatever that means. You're subject to ransomware. Your everything is at risk. You have to buy LifeLock. You have to absolutely pay for that. And I think that's another, issue is, how far do you go? And companies do the same thing. And I was in your session today that was really talking about, how far do you go on your vendors and your corporations of how much security is enough, but how much is too much?
Yeah. Well, I think on a personal level, I think we're starting to see that more of these traditional enterprise providers are looking at individuals as also, and we've always bought anti-malware, antivirus for our computers and such. But I think actually thinking about us as individuals and saying, well, what do you think about your home or your car or your kids who have got internet-enabled devices, not only just phones, but like toys that have cameras inbuilt in them and so forth. And so I think much more a lot of the security and insurance companies are looking at saying, how do we service you better? I think sometimes there's an element of scare tactic about it, but I also think it's, well, if you're buying car insurance and contents insurance, but actually most of your digital assets, as you think about them, are some way connected digitally, it probably makes sense to think about how you protect that. Because it may be complex to think about how you go to a Bitcoin exchange in order to buy that for the first time, in order to transact with somebody from from Europe who is now saying that they've got access to all your sensitive data. So I think in that respect, I think we need to start thinking about it as just any other risk that we look to underwrite and indemnify against. And businesses are doing the same. It's a slow process. For the 550 billion in losses we see every year, I was saying in the presentation we gave earlier, there's about 3.5 billion in premium. So there's this massive capital efficiency gap at the moment, but we're catching up. We're just a bit slow to realise the impact of this as a risk topic.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we need to take a short break, but stay with us. In 60 seconds, we'll continue our conversation on all things cybersecurity and risk with Adam Pegman.
OneTradeX knows there's more than one way to invest. OneTradeX is the Cayman Islands' only fully licensed online broker-dealer, offering discount trading services to individual investors and traders, hedge fund managers, and family offices. OneTradeX has the most competitive online trading prices of any offshore broker worldwide, with no custody or management fees, free demonstration accounts, and no charge to open an account with a $5,000 minimum deposit. Trade stocks, options, futures, bonds, and Forex. Learn more and open your free demo account today at OneTradeX.com. OneTradeX, the Cayman Islands' #1 choice for online brokerage. OneTradeX is licensed to conduct securities investment business by the Cayman Islands Monetary Authority.
This is
Money Sense, bringing an informed financial perspective to the Cayman community. Brought to you by the CFA Society Cayman Islands and sponsored by OneTradeX.
And now, more Money Sense.
Okay, welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about, and you alluded to a little bit, Adam, of kind of these household toys, household appliances, kind of that Internet of Things that we're all starting to become very reliant on. And I know even personally, I talk to my Alexa probably the first person I talk to in the morning and the last person I talk to when I go to bed. And everything is in the cloud, and I love that. And I love that I don't have to back it up to something else. But, I mean, is that a huge risk to my security? Is Alexa listening to me all the time? Not to put my tin hat on, but
it's super creepy. It's super creepy.
I have like a post-it note over my webcam.
It's a robot, too. It's not a person. You kept referring to it as a person.
Emil is very concerned about my love for Alexa, but I've become dependent.
I'm the Generation X dinosaur in the room, and then you're a millennial, so okay. But Tell us, what should we do about these?
Save us, but don't tell me I have to get rid of her.
No. I think whether you're a business or whether you're an individual, not to make this sound a bit too mechanical, but I think there's just this cost. On a personal level, it's more of there's this natural calculus in your mind about some sort of cost-benefit analysis. And I think at a business level, you need to be a bit more formal in how you think about that. But there is a cost-benefit analysis. You think, wow, that's great that I can throw away one iPhone or one Samsung Android phone, get the next one, and it's got everything there from my last handset. You know what I mean? It's got all my photos, everything's synced back in. That's just, the efficiency of that is great. I take a photo on vacation and then I can pull it up somewhere else, and that's good. And similar with the Alexa, I think, any type of home device that allows that connectivity, do I need anything? Oh, actually, I ask Alexa or I ask the Google Assistant on my phone, and it can use the camera in the fridge to be able to tell me if I need milk. All those things are great. And I think it's similar for businesses, cloud computing. We don't need a massive IT infrastructure and machine in-house. We can just ask Amazon to provide that to us. But the cost-benefit analysis is, what if those things break, whether accidentally or nefariously? And I think we're, on a personal level, we're starting to engage with that a little bit more sensibly now. What is the cost benefit? Maybe before I think we dived in, which is good in terms of uptake of these things, but I think now we're starting to say, what is the trade-off here? We're starting to see some of these privacy cases make their way through different committees and legislative sort of committees in the US and EMEA. So I think people are becoming a little bit more savvy about it. So
I know there's been that kind of government push to try to get access to people's phones, and Apple's saying, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to unlock a phone and use that. Or, as you were saying earlier, did an Alexa overhear something that could solve the murder? Did Alexa hear the murder? Did Alexa hear a crime being committed that we could use in court? And even I personally find that as a little bit of invasion of privacy from even just my own standpoint, and that I wouldn't believe off the top of my head that I would want any of that to be private, or that there was any world where it could be used or even pulled out of just my everyday life that I'm living.
Yeah, I think that's why I think people are now starting to engage with at a business level in terms of what is cyber. Oh, we're a heavy industry company. We don't have any personal data apart from our HR records. We're not B2C. Cyber doesn't mean anything to us. And then NotPetya happens or WannaCry happens, and all the operational technology gets bricked on a production line or at an oil rig, and they think, oh, yeah, everything's now digitally connected. And it's much the same on an individual level. I think we're starting to say, yeah, I use a lot of applications or services, and I don't actually pay for those, or I pay a nominal fee for them. The trade-off is that people use my data for other purposes on the back of that, for advertising and other ways to monetize that. And so I think people are starting to engage a little bit more about that in terms of what is that trade-off. And for a lot of people, they probably think, I don't mind. But having said that, how do you deal with something when it does occur then, right? If you don't mind, if you're quite happy with that trade-off like a business, saying, look, we can't bring down our operational technology on our production line because we don't know if that old bit of kit will boot back up if we patch it. So we accept that risk because we just know we have to. Much like on an individual level, we accept that risk. We use Facebook or we use Google Assistant. We're giving away our data. What happens actually when something nefarious does happen? I think that comes back to then the role of insurance. Providing that hedge because you have taken on that risk.
Yeah, you saw that a lot with the Facebook catastrophe, in that it came out that Facebook had provided everyone's data to companies that paid for it or whatever else. And maybe and tell me if you guys were alone in this, I wasn't really surprised that Facebook was selling my data. I guess in my mind, I knew that if I was putting something on the internet, and I know that Facebook makes money, that at some point my data, or at least general information, was being sold because I can see the ads that are popping up that are specific to me. But obviously there was some outrage, and maybe I'm at least mature enough to know what to put on the internet and what not to put on the internet, but there's a lot of people that are not. And so going back to that insurance idea, let's dig a little bit deeper into that, because maybe I don't understand what that risk is or what need there is on an individual basis, in business too, but to insure against loss of you could never get it back, I guess, but at least you could be compensated monetarily, or what do you mean by that?
It seems like it's a new industry, but is there such a thing as a typical product?
Yeah, so that's interesting in terms of what is a typical product. It is still an emergent area, and so I think we shouldn't confuse it being rapidly evolving as a bad thing. I think it's rapidly evolving in a positive way in terms of working out ways to add value to customers, and increasingly as the customers is defining what that is. I think the market's reflecting that in terms of breadth of coverage and increased capacity and so forth. So yeah, it is, but it's a very innovative space, and it's very much sort of trying to respond to client needs. And I think, on a personal level, on a professional level, you have to look at where do you get the value. If you're a mature multinational organization that have worked it all out, maybe the insurance is just the balance sheet protection. Maybe it's just give us some cash to pay for the things that we will do when we know something bad is happening, because we have a team. We know, we've got a very well-staffed up team. We're operationally mature. That's great. You speak to a lot of small businesses that may have somebody who's an IT engineer. They don't have a team of hundreds in their security organization that will deal with this internally. So insurance, yeah, it's great to give a bit of cash injection, but actually what they need to plug into is vendors. So, what do I need? How do I bring the right people to respond to an incident that I have that I actually don't even know? Do I need legal counsel? Do I need somebody who's going to walk me through in terms of technical, digital forensics and so forth? So it's a great way for less mature and smaller businesses to sort of move up the maturity curve in terms of their cybersecurity readiness by actually using the insurance market, who have already got a panel of vendors that they can actually bring to the company. As well as, I think also it's a good way for those companies to maybe arbitrage that market by saying, well, I'm a small company. I could go and contract with 6 companies that I need to help me respond to a cyber event, or I can use a market's buying power who have negotiated those rates with those vendors and utilize that rate card and that panel more efficiently in terms of capital efficiency to respond to security events. So I think people are starting to get that value. And it's on a personal level as well.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'm from a liability standpoint of the company. How much of that can you actually kind of push off onto the vendor? And that is, obviously, in terms of small businesses that do not have, obviously, the know-how, like myself and Emil, to have a robust cyber program in place beyond just here's the cyber program that you're supposed to do, and this is what you need to show the regulators when they come into your office that if this happens, this is what I'm going to do, and I have no idea what's in it. Yeah. How much of that can I really offload onto a vendor, and how much liability do I retain myself?
Yeah. Well, I think particularly if you're an individual, you run a family office or something like that, you're probably signing up to contracts with cloud computing providers and providers of financial tools and systems and services, probably with not a lot of visibility as to how liability is treated in the event of a ransomware event to you or the vendor, or if there was a breach of liability. And you may not be able to actually negotiate those anyway, in terms of how they manage down their limits of liability to you in the event of, I'm sorry, we've disclosed all of your information, but our liability to you is capped at the contract value or some percentage of, which may be minuscule in terms of the commercial impact or the privacy impact that you have, which again goes exactly reputation impact. So it goes back to a degree to the insurance. How do you use the insurance best in that context? But I think as well in terms of you can't. I think because of the maturity of the privacy regulations, we've seen in the US now, in California, in Europe, in Australia, in Singapore, in China, Korea, and other places, you can't contract out that risk anymore. If you're a family office and you open to third parties and you're taking their personal information and that becomes breached, but it was your vendor. Quite often now we're seeing, in terms of the fact pattern around some of that legal action, there's probably joint and several liability then involved in all parties associated with that breach. It's not simply, we just use somebody for data processing. You need to take a more active sort of view as to who those people are and how you're entrusting them with that data.
Let's say our audience has their interest peaked, and we don't have too much more time, but let's say the audience interest is peaked either from a commercial or personal point of view. What should they do next? Is there a 3-step plan? What's the next step in protecting yourself? Yes. So I think we often think about better understand the risk.
making plans about what that, making plans, developing the strategy around that risk and then testing that. I know that sounds very simple, but it can be very complex, or it can be as an individual, if you run a family office or the like. But I think the first thing is just to understand actually what your digital footprint is, be it a corporation or an individual. What do I mean? Should I be sufficiently concerned? Do I use a lot of digital technology in my home, or my financial advisory firm, or if I run a large corp, are we actually digitally dependent? Where is that? Trying to understand that a little bit better. What is that footprint or that digital estate? And understand what the risks are associated with that. And I think the other two bits are then, what is your plan around that? Keeping in mind that there is a cost benefit, using that technology. What are we willing to accept? What do we need to pass off? Maybe insurance is a useful strategy in helping with that. The last bit is actually quite often the most important, which is how do you test how you respond to those types of events, either as an individual, which may sound a little bit sort of mechanical to do, to test, but as a corporation as well. What do we do in the event of X? Because the first time you are dealing with that, you want to be doing that when the house is burning down, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
You want to know what it is, who you need to engage with. Maybe that's a breach coach from a law firm that you're contracting with. Maybe that's digital forensics. Maybe that's the insurance company or the market that you've got on. But definitely in terms of companies that we see, in terms of the financial cost of cyber event, it's materially different if they actually have a plan and they've tested that plan. I'm talking about, up to 30% better, response time improvement in the actual financial cost to them and so forth, if they've actually been through a program and tested it before. So, I think, understand the risk, develop strategies around it, and then test it. Test the responsiveness.
It's such a new, high-tech, futuristic concept that we're talking about, and yet the answer, the solution, is straight out of wisdom of the ages. Be prepared.
Yeah.
Think ahead. Just all the similar things that you insure for, all the similar things you do there, it's just a new facet that you have to address. Be prepared.
Got to run fire drills and security drills. Cyber security drills. But at least you don't have to run outside in the rain for that. But sadly, we are out of time. But Adam, thank you so much for joining us on Money Sense. I know you had a packed schedule with the conference, and there was a lot of people that wanted to talk to you today, so we are very glad that you were able to join us. As a final note, we wish to thank our sponsors, One Tradex and the CFA Society of the Cayman Islands, and remind our listeners that a rebroadcast of today's show can be heard as a podcast on the CFA Society Cayman Islands webpage, and encourage anyone who has a question or topic that they wish us to cover to please tweet us at MoneySenseRadio and join the conversation. With that, thanks again, and please join us again in 2 weeks.
Money Sense is brought to you with the support of One Tradex. One Tradex, the Cayman Islands' #1 choice for online brokerage.